these work? This is the first time I'm using one of these rap ones. I feel very TED Talky. My name is Kilgore. I'm an evangelist at Powerhouse, and the title of my talk today is Open Source, Open Revenue, How to Take on Big Tech. I had dreams of being able to memorize all this, but I'm gonna have a few notes here to help. So if you listen to most of crypto and open source these days, the mood is pretty bleak. Governance is dead. Open networks can't compete with centralized companies. Just use the cloud, bro, and worry about the power structures later. But now, suddenly, 3 cloud companies basically control all of our data and all of our users. They have leverage over all of us. They say jump, we say how high. This was not the intention. The internet was supposed to be open. But that's what happens when you get speed, convenience, and capital all pointing in the same direction. You reach for managed clouds, proprietary tools, and closed feeds, because those are the fastest way to ship. But then over time, the digital rails of our economy are held by a few landlords who are only beginning their rent extraction. We cannot go back to the old corporate stack and call that a win. We have to go forward, we have to come up and think of something else bigger and better. In this talk, I want to lay out a concrete model for doing that. How can an open network keep control of the critical parts of their stack, stay forkable and composable, and still generate real revenue that flows back into the people and products that created the network in the first place? Let's be honest. Most of us rent our computational life. I do. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I do. We rent compute and storage from a few clouds. We rent identity and payments through a few walled gardens. We rent our audience through social media platforms. You do not own the access to your Twitter followers. Elon does. Renting is convenient. It scales quickly and cheaply and feels cheap at the beginning. But the value you create doesn't flow to you, it flows to the landlord. Economists call this rent extraction. You do the work, the platform collects the rent. When the rules change or prices rise, you accept it. What other options do I have? Is there another X, YouTube, VMware, or other digital monopoly that exists that has a stranglehold on its users and developers? So the question for builders is not, is cloud good or is cloud bad? The cloud is not going away. I would love to see everyone run their own servers at home, but that's just not realistic because it's very hard for me to do it. The real question comes around leverage. Who has leverage in these situations? Do you control the rails of your project that they depend on, or do you depend on someone else's incentives? Okay, so let's look at a quick history of how we got here. I think the 3 moves that I see as getting us in this. So 1, open source built the infrastructure, but big tech won the platform game. Linux, Postgres, Kubernetes, everything is open source. Yet the companies that wrapped them in closed interfaces captured the customers, the data, and the profits. Microsoft won, Apple won, Salesforce won. Maintainers mostly got a thank you. Second, cloud and platforms turned that into a soft lock-in. If you notice in the back, we have some coasters that say no lock-in. And I think that is a rallying cry in today's world, is trying to build things that you're not trying to lock your customers and consumers into it. Third, our open source funding answers have mostly gone at the wrong end of the equation. So we have had a lot of experience, especially in the crypto area, about how to better fund open source, but too many of them look at the distribution side of things. It's how can we better distribute funds to those that maintained and built the product. What's missing is the value capture side. How do we get more money flowing into open source funding, and then we can figure out how to distribute it. So, why software needs new economics? I'm not an economics major, but I don't think most people who talk about economics are. So I feel like I can make this up, but there seems to be something really unique with software, right? We learn all about shipping goods across the country and all these things, but software is just so different. And I think it's kind of weird that we just have this new economic asset, capital, labor, whatever we want to call it, and we're really still fitting it into corporate structures that were spearheaded 200 years ago. So the three things that make software very different. First, near zero marginal costs. Once you produce software, it is almost cheaper, very cheap to be able to reproduce that software. Now it costs a little bit to run that. We can get to that in a second. But just in terms of the actual code itself, zero marginal cost to rapidly distribute it. Network effects reward scale. Software enables new networks all the time. We're just kind of understanding the power of networks, whether they be cities, digital ones, but software really has created really new networks. But unfortunately now, if we look at these networks, whether it's Facebook, of course it has a network of users, but it also has a network of advertisers. If we look at YouTube, all of the content creators in the world are on YouTube. Everybody is watching YouTube. So we have that network effect. The reason you go to YouTube is because everyone's there. Everyone's there because you go to YouTube. That's really powerful. It's a great network. The problem is Google owns it. So how can we build a network where we have that network that is driving productivity and innovation, but it's just not owned by a corporate cloud? And this is probably going to happen this week in DevCon, but I'm happy I've gotten to slide 6 and I have not said AI yet. But of course it's coming, because everything I've said before has happened before the AI wave, or we're in the AI wave now. But this is only going to put things on supercharge. Obviously, there are policy moats and regular capture going on in the US and elsewhere that really give the incumbents a huge advantage. If you look at, now we're shifting where most of the compute use is moving from training to inference, and that's just going to give another huge advantage to the large cloud monopolies. Yeah, and then nations, and the Silicon oligopoly. This is obviously taking, geopolitics to a whole other level. So all of these issues are just going to get worse with AI involved. To try to bring us up a little bit, obviously we want the world to be a bit better, but I think it's time we can take stock of the things that we have built well and are doing well. Of course, Bitcoin and Ethereum. We've created neutral economic infrastructure at global scale, and we have trillions of dollars in assets secured, payments, all of that happening without a single corporate entity owning anything. All of that is being run by the network itself, right? The network is somehow coordinating to deliver, DeFi, DAOs, NFTs, all of these things that I have in Ethereum. That was not a top-down initiative. That was something that was enabled by open networks. So we're trying to do that more. How can we figure out what that coordination engine that helped power Bitcoin and Ethereum and other blockchains, how can we harness that and bring it to other areas of the digital stack? Okay. Sorry. The DAO stall. Is anyone here smoke meat? I don't know if that's a thing that you say at conferences, but I've been getting, as I've aged, thank you. I know people eat meat, so that's good. But I've been, as I've aged and I've had children, I think you're required to at least experiment with smoking meat. But I love pork butt. Pork butt, you're trying to get the perfect temperature. It takes 12, 14 hours. The first 3 hours, the temperature just rockets up. Every hour, you're just getting a new one. You're feeling really good. And then hour 5 or 6, it just stays right at 170 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 75, 80 degrees Celsius. It just stays there for 4 or 5 hours. You've got it in a fire and it's just staying right at that one. And then it eventually goes up and the meat is excellent, whatever. Anyway, I think we're in that DAO stall phase. We had the first couple years of things oh wow, we can do really somewhat exciting things. This is really, really cool. And then we've just been moving this direction. Doesn't mean that there's not a fire going on, that we're not smoking things, that it's not doing the work, that we're not actually melting the membranes and the fat to make that meat really, really juicy, but we have kind of stalled in there. And so kind of what's been going on with that? Yeah, we have a couple different reasons here that we're going to kind of come up with a reason to fix, but governance without execution, we have lots of people in forums, not enough people kind of building things and the links between those. And I think one I just heard on the panel before that I think has always been really underrated by folks in the DAO space, and that's a legal and jurisdiction risk, right? This doesn't mean that we have to adopt those corporate structures, but it does mean that like, yo, I pay taxes, and like I'm gonna pay taxes, and I need to buy a house, and so how do I do that? And it's difficult for me. I have some way of maneuvering it, but if you're gonna try to figure out a way to get lots of people involved in there, you can't just make everyone go out on their own and try to deal with themselves. We have to figure out ways to do this better. Okay, I just saw him on the stage, so I don't know if he's back in here, but Nick had this tweet from Hats, had this tweet a couple weeks ago, and it makes me feel really seen. He says, "It's pretty revealing that everyone is trying to frame their thing as not a DAO, but a new thing, some better thing." Now, first, I feel very, very seen, because in the next slide, I'm going to try to pitch you on like a new thing that's not a DAO, but like a new, better thing. So Nick is definitely onto something. But I think that what this, this criticism is pretty fair. We had a phase where everything was a DAO, right? Like, I mean, people, before 2020, it wasn't necessary that every crypto project eventually would like, oh, we're gonna launch a token and be a DAO. But suddenly, like, we went through that wave where everything was a DAO, and now we're in like another phase where no one wants to say DAO anymore, right? And so I don't know if this is the DAO stall or not, but I'm not here to pretend that DAOs secretly worked and are like the greatest things, but I'm also not here just to do a lazy rebrand. I think we do need to look at what has gone wrong and how we can kind of build better structures and systems. But what I still care about is what got me interested in DAOs in the first place. I want to build organizations that the network owns. I want to build things that have sovereignty that are not tied to any corporate identity. The same dream that you had in 2017 with folks that got in then or later. We want to revive that same dream. So, the cool new DAO rebrand. Well, first off, we're not getting rid of the DAO. That's a really important thing. The DAO can stay. We love the DAO. We want to have governance and everything now. But the DAO is not enough, right? Because as we, just think from a basic standpoint, we need other things involved. So we have 5. Ooh, I have this. Here we go. I wasn't sure if I was going to use it, but this is perfect. So we have these 5 entities, one network. So the DAO, on-chain organization, the decision-making community, sets direction in public, allocates resources, and maintains shared standards. Now the operational hub, this is what pays contributors. So we have this, in Powerhouse, we set this up for ourselves. We've also spinning out of Sky ecosystem, so we've done a lot of work with Sky in terms of setting up these entities that can pay contributors easily, compliantly, without any hassle. But that's all that entity is responsible for. Third is the operational collateral fund. So this is an investment layer, right? So this is what links capital to contribution, and we have a structure that does this for that. And then the fourth is, and I think this is really the key missing element in a lot of the open source element, is this is the revenue generating hub. So this is the entity I like to think is this is what has to apply to be in the App Store. So we can build an open source software, but then have someone else, another entity, monetize it, and then have another entity that's actually paying the contributors, and then have another entity, the operational collateral fund, that is actually allocating capital between them. And then the fourth entity outside the DAO is the IP entity. And this is really important, both in terms of the brand of the company, and also the license, the software licenses themselves. So for the software licenses, we are proposing like a 2 dual track license model. So of course, we're open source. We'll get to that in just a second. But everything open source. If you want to use it, open source, personal use, totally fine, do whatever you want. But if you were going to like take the code and then make money off of it, some of that money needs to flow back into the system. Right? A certain percentage, kind of how that works. But having that dual license model ensures that people can still play around, compete, and do whatever, but also ensures that you'll have revenue back in the system. So this gets to open source capitalism, which, of course, every time I say it, I still think of, or the first time we were talking about it and thinking of it, it's that word like, no one knows what it means, but it's provocative. It gets the people going. And I was, I'm American, and when I was thinking of open source, we were talking about it, and my image is like the 1990s with like Bill Gates being like, those Linux communists, they are challenging the American way of life. And I just think that's totally off base and like wrong. It's more the opposite. If you look at open source, like open source is highly competitive, right? There's no moats for people to sit in. It creates better products because you're not paying as much in terms of rent. And it's a shift in terms of viewing open source just as, oh, this is a good thing that we all want to support, to being like, open source creates better economies, better products, better societies. The problem is we don't know how to kickstart the flywheel, right? So this is actually a Gemini creative flywheel. I'm not sure why I was doing that, because it was difficult to do it in Google Slides, but now I see the stuff behind it. Anyway, the problem with, if you get a company, it's very easy. You take investment, you build a product, you make some revenue, you get more investment because you have the product, you pour the revenue back in, and like the flywheel goes. Open source is just missing that, because it's always dependent on some charity or donation at some point, right? And we've got to break that. So the key here, not just in terms of getting revenue that pumps back into the system, but once you do that, then you can go to investors and ask them to invest in an open source project, not because they just want to be like nice people and donate to the nice little open source folks, but because they want to make money, right? Because they want to see their investment go up. And if you can tap into that, then you're unlocking billions of dollars of capital that is just reserved for like SaaS products now. So the key is to be able to do that, and that's what you get when you can capture more of the revenue from that. So making it practical, the Powerhouse stack. So we have 2 products, and I don't know if we'd call legal blueprints a product. I don't think lawyers do products, but ACRA is the marketplace for coordination. So this is a decentralized Upwork. It is the way where DAOs and builders can come together, find work, give projects to other folks, pay people compliantly, easy across the globe. It's the way to really be able to run your organization in a way that you can tap into the global network of developers around the world. Vetra is sovereign scalable applications. So this is a new stack to basically build any type of application. We originally built this for for operational software. So as I said, we were doing within the Sky and MakerDAO ecosystem, so we're trying to figure out how to build customized software for Sky and MakerDAO. And if you looked at any large company in the world, they have lots and lots of customized software. So we started in with that, but it's really something that could make anything. Here we go. The key, this is coming out of the hair. The key thing here, tying back to the talk, is scalable sovereign infrastructure. So right now, cloud providers, VMware has just had this big crisis, but they have people locked in, and then they'll just like jack up the prices. And so Vetra is a platform, and also a cloud platform that you will not no lock-in, right? So even if you can choose your cloud provider, but you will not be tied in for the whole stack. The last one is legal blueprints. So going over all of those different entities that we're talking about for scalable network organizations, Powerhouse is working on different legal blueprints to make that easy for anyone to be able to do, to set up an operational hub or revenue generating hub anywhere in the world, to be able to pay someone very quickly there. So I think there hasn't been, people complain there hasn't been that much interesting happening in DAO governance in a while. It does look like we had an interesting proposal this week in terms of the unification proposal that was submitted by Hayden Adams. This would be a major overhaul over the Uniswap ecosystem. It's gotten a lot of chatter on the Twitter webs, but it is, well, the big thing is it would turn the fee switch on, and it would then drive that back to Uni through token burn. I found the most interesting part of it was really twofold. One is the lab's sunsetting private monetization. I'm sure most folks know, because you don't trade on Uniswap's front end, but Uniswap's front end takes a 0.15% fee for every trade that it goes on. That's only when it comes from the front end. They're getting rid of that, and they're going to send the proceeds from that, or the estimated proceeds from that, into a Uni burn. And so what you see here is you see Uniswap trying to align their whole ecosystem around a single economic asset, the Uni token. Not so much so you have labs off trying to build its own product that is monetized by the front end, but where everything comes back to the uni token. And I think that alignment is something that is needed in all DAOs. And that's an alignment that you really need to, you need different structures to prevent. So while I see the uni proposal as a step forward in terms of economic alignment and like the kind of open source capitalism element, I am a little concerned in terms of like the decentralization element, because as we look at these entities that we have here, the point of this is to split up the labs entity, right, into basically these like 4 different entities that are doing that, whereas like labs now becomes this gigantic gorilla in the Uniswap ecosystem that it's hard really, I think, for anyone to be able to overcome there. I do think it's good that they got rid of or folded the foundation into labs. Not that the foundation wasn't doing great work, but just because that had a very uncertain role in kind of how things existed there. But it is, let's see, yeah. So it does kind of get into why token from the beginning. Bitcoin and Ethereum, like why token is very easy. You can't run a blockchain unless you have an asset that is valuable that you're handing out for block rewards or something. But for Uniswap, like Uniswap it's an application. Like it runs trustlessly without anyone else besides like Ethereum. Right? It doesn't need to incentivize people with Uni to run its network. So this move, I think, sends another clear signal that token alignment, that the reason we have tokens is to economically align networks themselves. And I think that's a really important thing. Obviously, we have a lot of regulatory struggles here in terms of being able to implement that, but I think that's ultimately where we're going. So I did just want to take, where was it? I wanted to go back for just a minute to, that's this one. Yeah, and I think, as I said, I'm not an economics major, but I think we need to be thinking like more interesting about how the digital world operates. And so the systems that we have here on the governance side, I think we move things forward through the DAO stall, right, where we are really experimenting with governance. It doesn't necessarily feel like we've achieved much, but I think all of the experiments in that are working well. Just as much as we talk about like the political science of DAO and governance and that, I think we need to be talking about the economics of it. Because we need to talk about the economics of how we create new economic systems that can actually make these things sustainable. I mean, the same thing happened when you look at blockchains themselves, right? A lot of the blockchains like started off with just like a technical security kind of matter, but then you realize like very quickly, oh, we have these things called crypto economics to be able to like actually create this security. So if there's anything I would ask for DAOs these days is to look more at the economics of things and be able to experiment in that phase and to really looking at creating sustainable ecosystems that capture the value that they're creating and recycle it back into the products, people, and networks that actually built the product in the first place. So that's it. Thanks so much for taking the time. I don't think I have just have the Powerhouse. Here we go. Just have the Powerhouse logo. We have a booth out there with, I'll be honest, I think some pretty effing sweet swag. It seems that koozies are something that is maybe just an American phenomenon. I don't know if people know what a koozie is. No? Well, you must not like cold beer. No. It's not beer, but it's the thing that keeps your beer cold. So it's these like little like hugs. And so we have cool ones out there for Acra and Vetra. We have some cool stickers out there, but I think the koozies are sweet. So I'm just going to show those. But yeah, that's it. Thanks so much for having me, and yeah.